So Abram rose, and clave the wood, and went, and took the fire with him, and a knife. And as they sojourned, both of them together, Isaac the firstborn spake and said, My father, behold the preparations, fire and iron. But where the lamb for this burnt offering? Then Abram bound the youth with belts and straps, and builded parapets and trenches there, and stretched forth the knife to slay his son. When, lo, an angel called him out of heaven, saying, Lay not thy hand upon the lad, neither do anything to him. Behold, a ram caught in the thickets by its horns. Offer the ram of pride instead of him. But the old man would not do so, but slew his son, and half the seed of Europe, one by one.
Hey folks, how you doing? It's Matt. I'm back with another review, as promised, the Regeneration trilogy, which, I've been talking about for a while, and I, of course, wanted to find my copies of the books. I have only the second and third, physical copy-wise, and that's because, the first book, this was actually part of our curriculum there in Teachers College, in teaching English, basically, where we were learning how to basically be English teachers. Regeneration was part of the curriculum, and I loved it. I loved it so much. It had everything that just about everything that I would love about a novel. It's historical fiction. It is set during World War I, and it weaves fiction and real life and real characters together in a way that's brilliant. Anyway, first I want to... couple things. Some house cleaning. You may notice, maybe, the video quality right now is way better than the last time I posted anything, and that's because I have a new computer. That was quite the tribulation, though. The last computer, which was aging and falling apart, it suffered some kind of problem there where it couldn't draw a charge anymore, so it died, and I could not, transfer information from it. I got just about everything I need is backed up in the cloud, but my autofill and save passwords? Nuh-uh. And so regaining access to all of my business accounts, banking, etc., was a bit of a slog. Some were easier than others, but yeah, there was a lot of bumps along the way. Plus, my phone, my aging iPhone, the screen broke, so yeah, I was cut off there for a fair bit. So in fact, I'd been wanting to do this quite sooner, because I rarely do reviews anymore, and I wanted to get back into them, and they make me happy. Damn it! So, yeah. Oh, and second item, today I'm enjoying Chimay Blonde as my beer. It is Belgian. Chimay is a Trappist brewery, and which means that it is part of a tradition that goes back to the Middle Ages, where monks brew the beer. They ferment it in the bottle, and this is also how champagne was developed. You have yeast in the bottle, which will then lead to secondary or even third, triple fermentation, and that is how you got carbonated beer back in the day. Before pasteurization, before cold filterization, before you could ferment it, then put in a bottle and seal it. Yeah, so a lot of their products are also placed in large bottles, your champagne-sized bottles, and corked. They do things really old-fashioned way. And this blonde is wonderful because it's their least strong beer. It's actually got a reasonable alcohol percentage, because those monks, they like their beer strong and flavorful, because oftentimes is the only nutrition they were getting, because they're fasting. Yeasty. delightful. And I was also drawn to such beers in the first place because of La Fin du Monde and the other lovely works by Unibrew. They're from Chambly, Quebec. They make Belgian-style ales. And yeah, growing up, we always thought that those beers were kind of swill or something, but we didn't understand them. And when I say we, I mean us boys. You go to Le Dépanneur in Hull to buy beer, and that's what you saw there, and you had no idea the quality of beer you were getting. Oh, God, we were so young and stupid. Anyway, getting to the book review, Regeneration by Pat Barker. Now, Pat Barker is, I managed to procure some of her other works over the years, mainly because my wife has enjoyed her writing, and so, yeah, when I say procured, basically her library collection and mine came together. I do want to read them. It's just, yeah, you know, when you read something from an author that you really, really like, and it kind of ruins you for anything else, you almost don't want to read anything else because you don't want to find out that maybe they weren't as good as you thought, or you know that it's never going to compare to that experience. Yeah, it's a bit like that. Any case, so the series, it all takes place during World War One. It is set in Britain as well as France. It's got some scenes where it kind of jumps around the globe, based on the character, the sort of the narration of individual characters. So it all makes for a very interesting story. But for the very first book, it is set at a sanatorium. And basically, yes, a place in England that used to be a hydrotherapy place. Basically where, yeah, they flush water up your bunghole and flush you out. And it had been converted during the war years, and this place is real, for real. It had been converted to a mental health facility for the sake of dealing with soldiers who had been diagnosed with what is known as neurasthenia. And today we would call that post-traumatic stress disorder, or just straight up war trauma. Soldiers who became incapacitated by trauma and terror and war. And yeah, and they're at this facility. Now, what is so very cool is two of the main characters are real historical figures. And there's Siegfried Sassoon, a famous wartime poet who, if I recall correctly, he survived the war. And he was, yes, his poetry, and this, of course, came up in class, and I pursued it big time. Thought, how interesting. And it connected very nicely to all the English lit I'd been reading at university before going for my B.Ed. And yeah, Siegfried Sassoon, he'd written several lovely poems there. Trying to remember a cavalry. Yeah, I would recommend people their best to look that up, because yeah, his poems, they don't compare for me to what Wilfred Owen, who's another historical figure that is brought in there, what he wrote. He wrote Dulce et Decorum Est, which is one of the most stark and stirring poems. In any case, the story revolves in large part around the two of them. These are two men who meet at the sanatorium. Wilfred Owen, his case is relatively simple. He has a stutter. After being in the war, it becomes rather uncontrollable, and he's incapable of doing his duties, just from, basically a nervous breakdown, so he's there. Whereas Siegfried Sassoon, he's there, very interesting. After his cousin is killed in the war, he he experienced a very painful emotional journey. He started volunteering for these very dangerous missions, basically trench raids, where they would go and basically jump into German trenches, kill people and retreat, or just jump through, drop some mill bombs in there, boom, 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 and retreat. He was decorated for it, but then he had a certain epiphany where he began to denounce the war and the imperialist powers that were fighting it, and he threw away his medal. He threw it into the ocean, and having done all this, he was facing charges of treason, basically. They were going to shoot him. However, he had some powerful friends who intervened and said, no, he's not treasonous, he's crazy. So they sent him to this facility. And so he's there dealing with all the, of course, the trauma that brought him to this place. And he's already established himself as a wartime poet. And Wilfred Owen finds him there and is looking for advice, because he too he's an aspiring poet, but he doesn't write about the war. And Siegfried Sassoon encourages him to do that, and the two realize together that it's therapy, it's exorcism. And as a sort of a subtle undercurrent, the two happen to be gay, which, of course, in this day and age, you don't talk about and you don't admit, because it's not only considered a mental illness, but social deviance and a crime. Yeah. And into all this, you have another character, and I swear, I didn't even realize that this guy was the fictional character. He becomes he becomes the main character as the series carries on. Nick Pryor, I believe, and he's there at the same place trying to get therapy because he has a sort of occasional mutism. He just suddenly can't talk and doesn't remember why or anything like that. And all of the patients there all have similar stories, right? They, at a certain point, they just broke down and couldn't keep going. They couldn't go forward anymore. And so they're being seen to. And so you get a very rich description of what soldiers' life was like, from the rear echelons there, soldiers who had seen absolute horror and death and were now getting medical care to address that. And it's, it is very, very, again, it's pretty rough. It's pretty rough reading, because of course a lot of this medical care could be very brutal. And they describe how one doctor, he's dealing with a soldier who also lost the ability to speak, and his therapy is applying an electrode to the guy's tongue until he finds his voice. He basically tortures him into speaking again, and then as soon as he's ready, it's like the guy is re-traumatized, but the doctor expects a thank you because, I cured you. And meanwhile, the doctor in the story, whose name I forget, I'm sorry, I do believe he was also a real figure there, because his life and times, there's quite a bit of that, and he is there throughout the series. He has a different approach, and I do believe Pat Barker actually had access to letters and so forth. I could be wrong, I don't know. It's just, given the level of detail with which she created this character, I feel like, yeah. Or he's a composite character of real people, which is often the case. In any case, this doctor, he has the more sensitive approach, right? He's Freudian educated, Jungian, whatever, but what he's finding, and what he is very much sort of explaining from his point of view, is that for these soldiers, it is dealing with them, helping them, is a really big task, because in order to do so, you got to deconstruct the very notions of manhood and what we would call toxic masculinity today, right? These very notions of that, deconstruct that to get down to just the core of it. And in short, it's just getting them to talk, which is the hardest part, because they're men in the second decade of the 20th century. Talking is not something you do, right? You suppress, you hide away, you drink, you shove your emotions down, you pour alcohol and food on top. You get fat, you drop dead at 50, if you're lucky at that point, right? And yeah, that's sort of how you do. And this is something that, for the baby boomer generation, they recognize this in their parents, right? Because this went on well beyond World War II. The Greatest Generation was exactly the same. You just kept it all inside. You didn't talk. And when it came to war trauma, yeah, that was not something you shared openly. And I know this for a fact from stories about my two grandfathers, other members of my extended family who, yeah, they all had their own way of dealing with the trauma of the war years. And it was really it was sad and scary. And I myself have like a personal connection to that because, of course, yeah, Carl and I over the years, which I won't get into here, there's been a few instances of trauma, and just stress and PTSD. So that all happened for me after reading Regeneration and the rest. But of course, it made so much sense to me at the time, and yeah. In the years that have followed, it's like that has not diminished one bit. So Regeneration is an introduction to all this. It shows Siegfried Sassoon and Wilfred Owen, how Wilfred Owen is maturing as a poet, goes on to write these amazing poems, and Dulce Decorum Est is definitely, it is one of the hardest hitting poems you'll ever read. Basically describes how soldiers are out and about doing their thing when suddenly they're hit by a gas attack and they're fumbling for their masks, but one guy doesn't have a mask. So he just dies horribly in front of them. And he's describing how they're carrying him away on a cart, and his death rattle is basically him coughing up chlorine gas and so forth. And he's saying, if you could see all this, you would never say to school children with such high spirits the old lie. Yes, dulce et decorum est pro patria more. It actually rhymes in the poem. Yeah. Basically, that saying means it is sweet and honorable to die for one's country. It's an old Roman adage. And the poem is basically saying, bullshit. Yes, someone dying, if you could actually see it, you'd never say that. And yes, he has another that, in which, what was it? An Anthem for Doomed Youth, I think was the title of it. Which is sort of the same thing. Obviously I can't recommend that book enough, right? And each and every one of these, I will have to break this into a few segments, I think, to give them their due. But yeah, and it's something that does very much come up. It's like, we are talking about, and this also, I remember this a professor of mine was talking about this with war poets and war poetry. W.H. Auden was the one that I had learned of before reading these books. And yeah, The Shield of Achilles and The Unknown Citizen, the stories there. It's like, on the one hand, these poets are describing carnage and horror and how life is being thrown away in a very, very stupid, needless fashion. This represented a major shift in human consciousness, and certainly from the perspective of Western civilization, Western intellectual history, right? The idea that World War I shattered the myth of romantic war, and it also shattered the myth of European superiority, cultural, racial, whatever. Or at the very least, it severely shook it. As a good friend of mine, Doug. How you doing, Doug? I doubt he watches these, but I'm going to tell him anyway. as he once observed, and I thought that is so apt, and I've repeated this wherever I could. But yeah, as he rightly observed, if World War I had shaken the foundations of those beliefs, European hegemony and superiority, blah, 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 and World War II shattered them, yeah. And this was definitely part of that. Soldiers who observed, who were there in the front lines, who saw the war firsthand, they completely challenged the notion that, going off to die for your country, that is not a glorious thing. Frankly, it's ugly, horrible, and disgusting. But there was this flip side to it, where they were talking about there is a nobility in it. There is a certain pride and sacrifice. Even if the war is stupid and the people who are leading it are a bunch of just morons, idiots, losers, undeserving individuals, right? What you are doing with your fellow human beings, your comrades, that is something to be proud of. And that is something that does come up in the story, because ultimately, Siegfried Sassoon, he chooses to go back because he's morally conflicted by the fact that it's like, I'm here basically in protest to the war. It is an alternative to me being shot for desertion, wanting to basically wanting to quit the war. And at the same time, he does encourage Wilfred Owen to go back too, just through example, because he feels the memory of the soldiers who died under his leadership. He was an officer. It's like, for them and for all those who are still there, I got to go back. I have to finish this, right? Whatever I feel about the war, I can't let other people die for that. And while I'm sitting here, and that was rather beautiful. And so that sort of wraps up book one. Billy Pryor. Oh, I got to mention him. His story, his mutism, his journey to finding what caused it. That too is really powerful. So through the course of his therapy, he's talking about everything he remembers from the front line. Of course, it's terrible. And they're walking into a hail of bullets and so forth, and the officers there saying, hold the line, and this is the Battle of the Somme. And they were told that, the bombardment would wipe out all the German defenders. We need only march across. And that is what they were doing. Marching across into a hail of bullets, because, of course, the defenders were not obliterated. They simply dug in deeper. Yeah. One of the most absurd stories to come from World War I there was the Battle of the Somme, the overconfidence with which the British Expeditionary Forces Command and General Haig were, the overconfidence with which they sent hundreds of thousands of boys to die. And so he is talking about that, but ultimately they find what it was, the trigger. And it was something that, according to Billy, when he remembers it, was nothing compared to everything else he saw. But basically, they were in the trench one day, a mortar attack happened, and he and the others, they were dispatched to where that mortar had landed because, yeah, it had killed some guys, and they were on cleanup duty. Ugh. And so there they were cleaning up the remains, and after putting them all in a bag, he finds an eyeball down by his foot, and he picks it up, and it's just like, oh, you know? It's like, what am I supposed to do with this gobstopper, he says. And they dispose of it there, and he is now just sort of spinning from the trauma of that. And he's looking at people, they're talking, but he can't hear them, and it looks like they're speaking in slow motion, and just suddenly he can't talk himself. And his doctor, that lovely, gentle soul who recognizes that, yeah, got to get the soldiers to talk, got to get them to say, fuck off with the whole manhood thing that we're supposed to have. You're not supposed to feel, you're not supposed to be affected by this. Forget all that, and ultimately accept that, you didn't fail. That was the key to their recovery. It's like, you didn't fail. What you saw was horrific, and any human being, every human being who would witness something like that would just not be able to deal with it. Right? And yeah, and this is why soldiers broke down. It's like your mind chose to deal with it by not dealing with it. You just flat out stopped. And and so yeah, he says that experience, that was nothing, man. I saw far worse. To which the doctor explains to him that, well, yeah, there's such a thing as a terrible trauma that hits you really hard and renders you just, knocks you flat, and there's the situation where attrition does it, where it's like you're being ground down and ground down and ground down, and then there's, it's like the straw that broke the camel's back. It's that kind of situation has been known to happen too. So yeah, at that point, he is able to speak again, regularly. Like, he doesn't have selective mutism anymore. And yeah, he of course breaks down and cries and lets all this stuff out, and yeah. And so, yeah, all these people, they all end up going back to the front line at some point. But the story continues into books 2 and 3. I will have to give them their own due because they too are brilliant, and a lot of things occurred. The trilogy does explore the war years and British society. Pat Barker being an English writer, from different aspects, and how the war years really brought out different aspects of the British Empire, at a time when it was facing a massive transition and major challenges. So, next installments, there's The Eye in the Door, which carries on the story, but it's taking a look at how Britain becomes very much inward-looking by 1917, when the wars hit a certain, just a crucial tipping point. And yes, and it examines how British society, it was kind of becoming a police state. The eye in the door is basically someone spying through a keyhole, and how dissidents and deviants were being targeted. And The Ghost Road is the finale. It delves further into the backstory of the Doctor, which is why I think he was real. And it's really quite beautiful. And also how, yes, the main characters, they return to the front. And the Ghost Road is a reference there. Basically, marching back to the front, it's like there's all these ghosts. If I, again, recall correctly, that was sort of the message there. That this is a highway leading to a death zone, so you feel the dead, and their ghosts are there, sort of welcome you, warn you, whatever, However you choose to interpret that or believe it. Anyway, it is, it only gets, equally good. Regeneration was it was an exceptional novel, so I cannot recommend that enough. And, as for the rest of the trilogy, it's like anyone who reads the first book, you'd be fine to have done that and stay there. It's kind of like reading the first Dune book. If I were to do a crossover with science fiction books I reviewed. But you really should carry on. Because like any series, right, it's like this was not a cash-in attempt, right? Writing sequels to cash in on the on what was good and what succeeded with the first book. Rather, it is the full development of the story, the full character arc of all the people involved, and the full message of what all this meant. And it is written. Barker is very good at this, right? She manages to really, really depict a scene, get into people's inner workings, right? And people who are real, intermixed with fictional people. And that was what was so awesome about the first book. It wasn't until book number 2 that I realized Nick Pryor is fictional, and he's kind of the main character. Whereas the other ones, who seemed like the main characters, who, yes, it's established, pretty early on there, or I think the teacher informed us of this, but yeah, just it's not hard to figure out that that Sassoon and Owen are real people, and and seeing them interact and what comes of their friendship and in their time at the sanatorium and all that stuff, it's like, that's brilliant. You're taking people, real life people, and you're getting inside their heads. That's ambitious, and that would require a lot of study and really, really doing your homework. So absolute hats off to her for that. Can't recommend this enough. Whew. And I'm happy to be once again talking about books, not just ones that I thought were good or had an influence on me, but ones that are like, no, these have had an influence on countless people for a very good reason. So glad to be talking about those again. All right, I'll be back with some more on The Eye in the Door and The Ghost Road, and I think, having given the series a good intro, I could probably do that in one episode. We'll see. As my publisher recently told me, nothing you do is brief, Matt. He was talking about the written word, but that's the exact same with my talking. I never, ever... Yeah. Anyway, be back soon. Thank you so much for listening. Okay? Take care.